So this is the Adam Fired Show for Expat Wealth. I'm delighted to be joined by Simon today. How's it going, Simon?
Pretty good, Adam. Good to see you again.
Yeah, likewise. And Simon, you didn't come directly to Thailand, did you? You were first in Singapore, I believe. So tell me a little bit about your story from like the UK to Singapore to Thailand.
Actually, I came here first, and I was here for about 8 years before I moved to Singapore, where I was there for about 8-9 years, including a stint in the US. So let's go back to the beginning. I moved here in 91. I moved here with an English girlfriend of mine at the time who was an employee of the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. So she got a posting at the embassy, 3 years.
Cushy job.
Yeah, not bad. And we came out together. I came out for an exploratory trip a couple of months beforehand to see whether there was an opportunity to do work. And I saw that there was, and I had a backup plan to basically swim and learn Thai, and came back with her and found a group of people. They had a company. We did lots of computer networking stuff and had a lot of fun. And that 3 years turned into 8, and that was really the start of it. Yeah,
fantastic. So 8 years in Thailand, it must have been a very different country then. Because I mean, I first came in 2007, and even then it's completely different to now. But in the 90s, did Thailand feel like a third world country? I mean, obviously that's a bit of a misleading term, as you recently said in our podcast. But did it feel like a very poor country at that stage, or was it fast developing even at that stage?
So it was definitely fast developing, but you could see that there were pockets of wealth and exclusivity and much larger areas of development, underdevelopment. So definitely you could see the poverty. It wasn't clean and tidy. It was disorganized. Traffic was more hectic. The highways, the elevated highways were not here in such volume. There was no train system. There were no meters in taxis. You had to haggle every fare in advance. But that added to the excitement, to be honest. So traveling up country, you could definitely see the sort of the lack of infrastructure, no street lighting, no 7-Elevens back then. Things shut down quite quickly. Hotels were pretty basic. There were quite a few workplace disasters that suggested poor health and safety standards. So it kept you on your toes. But I think there are a lot of people that react negatively to that because they want to feel comfortable and safe, and there are others that relish the challenge of doing something that's edgy, can be made to feel edgy, and I guess I'm one of those.
Yeah, well, there's also an excitement, isn't there, about seeing a place develop? Because I can remember when I lived in Cambodia, it was fast developing at that time, but that meant that you actually saw things. You saw like new terminals in the airport. You saw like, for example, PassApp was brought in a few years after I left Cambodia. Then when I went back, I kind of saw the development. I imagine in a way, it would have been exciting to see like the first mall in an area, and then gradually, the meters in the taxi, and seeing the improvement. I guess in a way that was kind of also quite exciting, right?
Sure. I mean, obviously that takes time. And I think the people that see that more clearly are people that are here every 6 months for 20 years, because they get it in snapshots like time-lapse photography. But when you look back and you think about how things have changed, it's quite remarkable. My office was on Sukhumvit years ago, and I remember distinctly the day where the orange machine that lays down track for the BTS went over the junction at the end of my road. And 20 years later, it went over the junction at the end of my road, 17 kilometers in a straight line from my previous office. As the system has expanded and made Bangkok much more convenient. It's not quite there yet, as we all know. The system is patchy, but it's massive in comparison with where it was before. So,
absolutely. And, as you say, it's probably more convenient to live in Thailand now. But I guess back when you were younger and in Thailand, in a way, there was an excitement there as well, though, right? It might not have had the same convenience, but it had excitement in bundles, I'm sure, right?
Yeah, sure did. Getting anywhere required flagging a taxi, either flagging down one taxi might be hard, or waving off 10 taxis that want your business might be harder. And then you have to negotiate, and then you can't follow where you're going on Google Maps because it didn't exist. So you don't know whether you're being taken the right way or not. And ordering food, obviously arrived not speaking more than 5 words of Thai. So you've got to work out where you're going, explain that, get there. When you're there, you're hungry, you need the bathroom, and you start your exposure to the culture that way. It was exciting, but I'm a open-minded kind of guy, and I like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I've seen something similar in other countries as well, because when I was also living in China, even certain things like the fact the toilets, there was the Chinese style toilets and things like that, and a lot of people just couldn't get over that kind of thing, right? Yeah. And those cultural differences. But I think if you come abroad, especially if you don't go to the Singapores and the kind of very developed places, you have to adapt quite a lot, right? It's natural, especially in the first few years. Yeah. And I guess, as you say, it's also exciting as well. But speaking about Singapore, then you then left Thailand, didn't you, to go to Singapore? Is that right? And then you went back to or returned to Thailand.
Yeah.
So what was going on in Singapore? Why did you return to Thailand?
So the full story is 8 years in Thailand. The financial crisis turned the business that 4 of us had together kind of upside down. We went from 50 to about 20 people in a few months. And the work we were doing was mainly advanced new stuff on what might be called high-risk discretionary budgets. And when the crisis came in, all of that money just dried up, and we didn't have any stable core products to sell. So our business kind of unraveled. I actually went to Hong Kong for a year to work on year 2000 related stuff for an investment bank, and then came back to Thailand for a year, and then moved to Singapore in 2001. And I moved there because I was given a job. I'd been without work since Hong Kong, living off the ridiculous amount of money I got paid for working on year 2K. And then decided I needed a job, and I went to work for a small company in Singapore that let me go after 4 months.
Nice of them, right?
yeah, because they were failing, and the guy that ran it didn't seem bothered, having made me move. It didn't make me, but he offered for me to move country, and then 4 months later stopped paying me. And I had enough money to pay my rent or pay for the formation of a Singapore company and get back to doing the sort of consulting work that I was doing in Hong Kong. And that's what I did. And that lasted for about 5 years and sort of dovetailed me into employment for a US software company for a couple of years. And then after that, I spun up an old idea of mine, raised some money, and moved to the US for a year.
Okay.
And that company didn't fare well. I got involved with, I hired or brought on board into the team 2 people that seemed the right fit but weren't. And by the time we worked it out, I was out of money and we hadn't got enough traction, couldn't really afford to stay there. So I took a job back in Singapore for a couple of years, working for the guy who was the chairman of our board. Sounds good, but we're a 3-man company. It was just a piece of paper. But did a real job for a couple of years in Singapore before moving back here. I'm going to say 2009 when I moved back, and I haven't been anywhere since, really.
After the financial crisis, yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly right. So I came back here, spent a couple of years. I started a industrial cleaning company. I was so up to here with technology and large companies and politics that I started a small dry ice cleaning company and did physical labor for about 5 years. And it was terribly rewarding. It's the most honest work I've ever done, because when you go to clean something, it either cleans it or it doesn't. And because it's new, the factory manager or owner is there, and they see it and give you the thumbs up to carry on or kick you out. So whereas with most software projects that I've been involved with, it can take months to years, if ever, for the real benefits to be visible, because just the nature of how software is just a layer in a business. It's difficult to see. So it was very satisfying work, quite hard work.
It's interesting though, because then Hong Kong, Singapore, the US, and then various stints in Thailand. Now, Singapore and Hong Kong, especially at that time, they're very different places to Thailand, right? Because they're regional hubs. At least Hong Kong was. It still is to a certain extent. And Singapore has really taken over now. So for people looking to move to this part of the world, what would you say the positives and negatives are about Thailand versus, say, a Singapore? Obviously, it depends on people's individual situation if they get offered a job in Singapore. But in kind of broad terms, would you say there's certain kind of clear positives and negatives?
There are some clear differences between Singapore and Thailand. I mean, physically, the simple stuff. Singapore is quite small and feels restrictive. So if you come from somewhere big and you are used to traveling around a lot, Singapore will feel restrictive. It's the same size as Phuket, and it's very, very dense. So if you're not used to having large amounts of people around you, Singapore might not be your best choice. But it's a robust, well-managed economy. It's tremendously transparent. It's easy to set up businesses. It's easy to find local resources. And it's easy to get to decision makers, and people make decisions quickly and honestly and based on, the solution fit, the, trustworthiness of the person doing it, after sales support, all of the normal things that business should be decided upon. Thailand is it's not a huge country, but it's a big country. It's about the size of France. You can drive for 2,000 kilometers in a straight line from the north to the south. It's got different regions that bring in different social norms, different food, different geography, different climate. It's all hot, but it's different kind of hot. And so it's got much more variety in that sense. It's also got lots of places that are natural and exciting in that they look totally different, whereas Singapore is basically a modern city every which way you look. Singapore was described as, Asia on training wheels by someone a long time ago. And I think that's a pretty good description. You can drop somebody into Singapore and they probably won't panic that much because it all functions like, a suburb of London or somewhere else. Schools are good quality, education is good, transport is great, logistics are fantastic, infrastructure is world class, the airport is ridiculously good, all of those positives, and a government that is proactive in all sorts of different sectors and throws its ample money behind the things that it wants people to focus on. Thailand is slower at things like that, but it's a much bigger problem to manage. There are issues about transparency. There are issues about the adroitness of certain government entities, the police and the courts and so forth. But it's a land of opportunity. There's lots of excitement in technology and AI. Manufacturing is obviously a huge thing here. We produce, close to the top 10 volume in number of cars assembled in the world. We were in the top 10 for a while, but dropped out. There's automotive supply chains that go very deep here, and electronics manufacturing. So there's lots of different industries that are here at scale. The education system is in need of lots of money. Employers are never happy with the capabilities of fresh graduates when they leave school. There has for years been a transition in play to what they call cooperative education, which is, in old parlance, it would be an apprenticeship, but it's done while you're at school. So you might spend your third or your fourth year at university, it's typically a 4-year course, placed at a company and reporting back to your school, but working for that company and being reported on by your employer for the practical application of your knowledge, working at that company. And I have great hopes for that. I would love to see that as a national standard, because I see the pace of change that's driven by technology is making it harder and harder for schools to have relevant curriculums. And I don't think it's their fault. right? I just think it's the nature of the animal these days is that technology is changing things so fast. Jobs are disappearing so quickly. Job types, job titles are disappearing. New ones are cropping up in their place. And educators are typically stuck in a 5 to 10 year curriculum program with little room for change. And it just makes for a bad result. So getting companies involved, I think, is the best way to ensure that people exiting the education system can deliver some degree of value or higher value than currently, and that should be encouraged.
Because that leads us to what you're doing now, and I believe you're currently investing in a company which is in that area. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. So I have invested in a company called Tinman. Tinman is building a platform that is purposed to make first jobs easier for all. And by all, what they mean is the students, their teachers, and the companies that engage with students or fresh graduates. And they expressly say engage rather than employ, because there are companies that will do things with undergraduates and graduates, but they won't employ them. They'll do internships, but they won't employ them because they want more experienced staff. And there was a recent study by the NIDA, National Institute Development Agency, I think, basically said that most companies want people with 2 years experience, and hiring fresh graduates is avoided if possible. And that's an unfortunate state of affairs. So this company, Tinman, they have a platform. It allows students to use workplace psychology tools to understand themselves better. And that then highlights the career paths they're most likely to be happy and therefore successful in, and then would connect them to employers who state that they hire for those roles. It helps the teachers understand their students from a position of workplace psychology. That allows them to do more focused and productive things. So instead of saying, I have 15 people who are studying this engineering, subject. Now that what they can do is say, I've got all of these students across all of these years that align with this job. All of you employers, you employ for that job. So let's do something. Either we come for a site visit, or you come and give a lecture and explain what the day in the life of a quality engineer is like, to help foster that understanding and each side being familiar with each other, so that they can start to reduce what is apparently quite high turnover. Around 25% of Thai students leave their first job within a year. And that's not beneficial for them. It's not beneficial for their employer. And it's not beneficial for the market in general. So what the guys at Tinman are trying to do is to create a more data-driven on-ramp from students into the workplace by getting companies involved earlier, allowing that cooperative education model to be based on workplace psychology rather than the individual's desire that I want to go for that work for that brand name company because they have a brand name, or my uncle works there, or everyone says it's a good place to work. You should go work for a company where you fit, because when you fit, you're open to both criticism and suggestion and training more so than you are when you're just there, for the paycheck or the brand value. And so that's what they're trying to do.
Absolutely. Now, I guess, though, the corporations or the companies, they're the ones paying, or do the students pay a small amount?
That's been a debate. One of the things that I get involved with as a principal investor in that company is talking about the strategy side of things. Currently, there are, I think, 2 tests for students. One of them is free and will always be free, and the other one is I think that their price point is under 1,000 baht. And the only reason they're charging the 1,000 baht, or whatever it is, 800 baht, is because they want the kids to be vested in the result.
Skin in the game, yeah.
If you free information, free advice is easy just to bat it away and ignore it. But if you paid for it, or if your mother's paid for it, she's going to make you follow through on what it says. And if you follow through and it doesn't work, it doesn't seem right, stop. But you don't stop before you pick up the ball and run with it. So that's their philosophy on pricing for students. It's free for faculty. The idea is it should be a tool that universities use to increase the employability that they can provide to their students, which should be the single unit of measurement of the quality of an educational establishment. Is what they deliver beneficial to your employment chances at the beginning and the longevity of that going forward. But companies pay not to view the students, but to communicate with them. So if you're an employer, which you are, if you were a Tinman subscriber, as I understand it, you sign up, you say, I'm looking for a marketing person, a content creator, and a paralegal. And everybody in the country who matches individually with those three different roles, which would be different people, different types of people, is now visible to you, but you can't see their name, you can't see their age, you can't see their gender, you can't see where they study. They're just a person with potential. And it's up to you to communicate with them in a way that you can establish trust and reliability so that they will then share whatever personal information they feel comfortable to share. And you can start to build a relationship slowly and very inexpensively over time to get them ready so that you create the workforce you need when you need it. So if you need 30 laser welders for your new plant, which is ready in 2 years' time, you start talking to first and second year students and you find the ones that match with that role and you whittle them down to the ones that pay attention when they visit your office and the ones that ask questions when you give them training and all the ones that play with their phones, you just deprecate them from the list. And you end up with, let's say, 50 people, of which you're going to hire 15. And if you've trained them to do laser welding and they go work for your competition or another company in the space, that's okay. Because you got the 15 you wanted when you wanted them and they've trained to your standards and that you know that you can work with them because you've done multiple trainings over time and they'll stay for more than 6 months. You'll get your money back and their career will benefit from it. And the university will have a gold star for getting them out there. Everybody wins.
And is this quite expensive for the employers or are there different packages?
So I'm not 100% up to date on their pricing. They have gone from, I think, pricing per package of like 2 jobs or 6 jobs or whatever. Now it's on an industry basis. So if you're in the hotel industry, you buy the hotel package and you get every job that's related to hospitality. And I think they're looking at 60,000 baht a year, and that's for everybody. They're not a recruitment business. You don't pay a recruitment fee. So when you hire someone through the system, there's no extra charge. So it's just you get a smorgasbord of industry roles, and you can anybody and everybody who matches. You could hire them all or none of them. That's up to you. It's how you communicate and how you get them across the threshold.
And I guess you can also do things like, for example, is it possible to do like welcome days, Zoom introductions? Because I guess some of the employers, for example, they might actually want to say, put out a notice maybe that says, okay, on this or this day, we're going to have some kind of meeting in our factory or our office or whatever, or we're going to do a Zoom call with everyone. Yeah. They can advertise like to everyone in that niche. Is that right as well?
Correct. So we allow the 2 parties to message each other. We use Line here in Thailand because it's the national communication standard, really. And it also means that they can bottleneck it. So the communication from to the students comes from Tinman's official account. So the student only has to add Tinman, and the student can define, I'm only interested in training exercises and internships and full-time jobs, and only for these 8 out of the 15 roles that I align with, only these 8 are of interest to me. So they've got 2 dimensions of filtration that makes sure that they don't get overwhelmed and they just walk away, annoyed by the number of messages they get. And then from the corporate side, the way it's set up is that you only get to message about specific touch points. So it could be a training exercise, a site visit, a CSR event. Let's go down to the beach and clean a beach and have a beer and some food, and then we'll dump you near home. Full-time employment, part-time employment, those sorts of things. So we then read the messages they send to make sure that the content matches the label so that some of these kids will be young, and we have a duty of care perspective, which is why they're anonymous until the student exposes their own data, and they don't expose their contact data. And then it's monitored to make sure that the content that's getting to the students is above board. So So
because parents will be worried in certain cases, right? So they want those safeguards, I guess, right?
And they should be. And there's a new Platforms Act in Thailand where all platforms, from the big guys down to the little guys like Tinman, have to follow certain procedures around data care, where data is stored, access to delete data, and those sorts of things.
Well, it's a global trend, isn't it? Now these kind of things, so it's understandable.
And it's completely. I don't disagree with the goals of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, it's interesting you mentioned about AI, or at least technology, and there'll be some parents watching this, or some young people indeed as well, who are kind of worried about these trends. Now, what is true is that all over time, all over history, jobs have been destroyed and created. But as you say, right now, there's this big kind of trend, and people are looking into the next 5-10 years and wondering what's going to happen. So it's interesting you mentioned in Thailand about the education system, but maybe partially it's a global thing, right? Because obviously, like even in the UK, US, whatever, we're not taught like financial literacy. We're not taught, for example, about, that much about technology for that matter. So do you think like globally, this is like an issue, that this is going to become a bigger thing, like more non-state kind of actors like Tinman around the world could become more popular? Because a lot of the things that are being taught to schools are not necessarily going to be relevant in, say, 10 or 20 years' time, right?
I'm going to say you're probably right. I don't profess to be an expert on education models or standards worldwide. My contribution to Tinman outside of money has been technology-related stuff. But obviously, as they've explained what they're doing, I've picked up on the sort of the market background and the drivers behind this. I think it's highly likely that the cadence of change driven by technology is problematic for educators worldwide. I would be surprised that that's not the case. I would also think that that's be surprised if that's not the case for companies. And large companies can assign R&D budgets and personnel to explore that and to think as far forward with what's available today and what they know is in the pipeline. Smaller companies will always struggle with that. So I think you're right. I think it's quite possibly problematic. We've created our own problem, and as you said, it's happened before, but it's happened. It started at a glacial pace and has accelerated, and it's going at a breakneck speed right now. And I think it'll only get faster. The way to get around it, certainly Tinman's philosophy, as they explain it, is transferable skills are exactly what they, are named as, right? And then you've got domain skills, which you put on top of them. So employers and recruiters talk about how flexibility and adaptability, strong communication skills are floating to the top of the pool of desirable traits that they look for in people. And the specific hard skills are important, but less important than the ability to be adaptable and just change direction pretty much on the whim of the organization.
It's harder to automate, I guess, whereas if you're just good at a hard skill, I guess it's harder to keep that long term. It's easier to get automated away.
It is, and some of those hard skills take years in the making. And if those ones disappear, then there's a lot of investment in time and learning, which is going to be undermined. We're moving to a very digital-based economy, and even the companies that do really solid physical businesses are optimized through technology.
Absolutely.
In ways that are not immediately obvious when you look at their industry.
Absolutely.
I worked for a company that sold fasteners, screws, basically, in normal parlance. They sold 100 million of them every day, which is about, if I remember, 25 or 26 full-size containers full of fasteners. and they went really, really deep on technology to optimize every step, of their processes, and it paid dividends. When you think, as an outsider, you think of business selling and shipping screws. You think there's got to be a limit to the application of technology, but that onion has many layers.
Absolutely. And I think it's affecting more businesses over time, because people forget that even, say, 10 years ago, people thought those very high trust services, like legal services, financial services, would always be done on a face-to-face basis. A lot of people assume that. But obviously that's been proven not to be true categorically, right? So I think as time goes on as well, technology is moving in that direction, right? Because I guess most of us, we bought our first product online, like, I don't know, eBay or something like that, $5 or £5 for something small in like the early or mid 2000s. Obviously some IT geeks maybe in the 90s as well, when the technology wasn't such a big part of our lives. But over time, it seems like technology is coming to all sectors of the economy, right? And the high trust, the low trust, the mid trust sections, also different industries. So I guess, as you say, no one's going to be completely exempt from this, but those people who have the right skills, maybe transferable skills, they can actually more likely adapt, at least, to the change that you think is coming.
It has to be done. I mean, I'm 57 years old. I've worked in technology with technology since I was 20, because I didn't go to university immediately. I got sent to university by my employer when I was in London. So I've been working with technology for quite a long time. I've worked on software projects, but I don't code. I've never written any code. I was a controller of software assets and a process person in the software project management. But I've never written code until 2 weeks ago, when I got Claude, the AI tool, to write me some Python scripts so that I could manipulate data to do things that I needed to do. I've worked with lots of data types, and I've actually built a CRM system, but it was not using a programming language. So I have a pretty good understanding of data and how you separate data and how you link it together to be able to do as complex analysis as the data itself allows. But I've never had the programming skills or the scripting skills to take advantage of what I know is inherent in the data. Now I can just sit there and ask Claude, and it will go off and it will write Perl scripts for me. And they run in terminal, in Unix on my Mac. And Unix help manuals are undecipherable to normal humans. So you just give the error codes back to Claude, and Claude says, oh, no, you need to do this. Here's the script, run this script, get this library. And it makes it all so simple, because you're interacting with a command line, which I'm familiar with but not good at. And it does everything for me. So I got, old dog, new trick. And I did in 3 days what would have cost me 20 or 30,000 baht in consulting fees, Upwork kind of stuff. And I did it myself, and I learned something in the process. It was great.
I mean, there's opportunities in everything, right? Not just threats. But that kind of leads me to something. I mean, obviously nobody can predict the future of any degree of absolute certainty. But when you think about the young people like, whether that's whatever kids or just young people in general, do you feel optimistic about the future when it comes to technology? Are you one of those people who think, well, people are going to have more time in 30 years and, they're going to potentially have more money? Remember John Maynard Keynes, even 100 years ago, he predicted that people would be able to work 15 hours a week, not just the rich people. It didn't quite work out like that. Are you one of those people who think maybe Keynes will be proven right? Or do you think it's going to lead to a situation where a small number of people in a small number of countries essentially take most of the pie in the next few decades?
Can I take a strategy statement from the British Foreign Office? Why choose sides when you can sit on a fence? I think I would vacillate between the two. I think there's lots of room for optimism when you look at the technology, and there's lots of room for pessimism when you look at how people use it. There's an argument to be made that technology has made a large amount of people lazier, right? What was the meme? Einstein, resurrected watching people use the internet, and being disappointed that you have the entire knowledge of humanity available at your fingertips, and you use it to send pictures of cats. I think that there's lots of hope in the technology. I think inspiring people to use it properly might be the hardest part, and we'll see how we get on with that. We can all only do our bit. I think, to circle back to Tinman, if Tinman can help, a bunch of people get jobs that they stay at and improves their career prospects, then that's a win. And hopefully the exploration that they go through the workplace psychology that's used, some of them will go down that rabbit hole, because that's a deep rabbit hole to explore. So, I'm relatively hopeful, but often, my inner pessimist comes out when I see how people don't seize the opportunity, the capacity that's in front of them, right, that's in their hands, and use it for something more beneficial, personally or socially, rather than the sort of instant endorphin, dopamine type fix that seems to be 90% of internet usage.
Yeah, and on that note, speaking about technology, what is the best way to contact you online? Is it LinkedIn? Is it elsewhere? How can people reach out to you if they're interested in doing so?
I think LinkedIn is probably the best. I try and stay off of Facebook, and I'm not on Instagram. I'm not on Twitter. So LinkedIn will be best. Simon Burgett.
Well, fantastic. Well, like and subscribe if you've enjoyed this show. And until next time, have a good day.